whatever.
So also one thing to note is that Pohlad has made it clear, not in the statement, but in interviews with Phil Miller, like I said, with the Star Tribune, and then Dan Hayes shortly after that with The Athletic, that unlike, say, the Timberwolves, when Glenn Taylor sold them over the course of years, and it actually became a court battle, but he sort of sold it to Marc Lore and Alex Rodriguez with like a down payment, a middle payment, and then a final payment, like sort of a gradual go from minority owner to sort of half owner, and then you take over the team. They're not doing that. This is explicitly not the case with the Twins, according to the Pohlads. They're selling chunks, big chunks, but they are retaining majority ownership, principal ownership, whatever you want to call it. And there's not like a path, 5 years from now, one of these minority owners has the option to buy another 40% or something like that and take over the team. Now, what I will say is, if the team has racked up $400-something million in debt, just paying off that debt, yes, it makes things a lot easier in the short term, but it doesn't necessarily change the circumstances in which you've been racking up that debt.
Right.
Now, what could change the circumstances, unfortunately, and this is my biggest fear for Twins fans, is that slashing the payroll to a point that you cannot help but at least break even or make money while receiving national television money, MLB AM money, selling even, a half-filled Target Field and all of their other, advertisements and various forms of income. I mean, last year it was reported by Forbes, and I guess over the last 2 years, that they made, I don't know, roughly $325 million in revenue. And
gross revenue, right?
Yes. Total revenue.
Right. Yeah.
And they've been running payrolls of $130 million during that time. You tell me the math on how you can lose $40-50 million a year with a payroll that's less than half of your revenue, and to the extent that you're piling up $400-something million in debt. I'm not saying it's possible. I'm just saying my pea brain just doesn't really comprehend that. And my predilection towards not buying what I've been told by this ownership group also kind of pushes me in that direction. We've also heard some, other things, speculation from people who have worked with them on the business side of other entities and stuff. But that's really my fear is, like you said, from their standpoint, and I'll read you another.
The one, I will say this, the one way it does help from a liquid cash standpoint is what we just said, which is they're buying that bond. They don't have to pay interest on that debt anymore.
Right.
Right. So, you could, if that entire debt is retired, you could in theory say, both to future buyers, right, but also to, those people that run your company. There, we've got an extra $20-30 million, or at least $20 million, maybe $40-50 million in yearly revenue that we don't, or an expense that's going to go away, and that should, free some things up. Now, we are both justifiably skeptical that that's what will happen.
Just on the most basic level, and then you wipe the debt off the books, and then you say, well, 5 years from now, if they sell it, they don't have to factor in the debt from their takeaway, except now they've sold off a third or more of the team, I'm assuming. Yes. And so you're going to get essentially the same situation where you're giving up a quarter or a third of the proceeds. Yes. The other part of this that I just can't stop but coming back to over and over is, how are you going to, even if you're no longer having to pay interest and principal on that debt, and that's, money, like you said, is sort of coming back to you, that is available to you, attendance is going to go down again.
Of course.
Like, the TV situation is not going to get any better in the next year, because who's going to subscribe to this? Like, I mean, who's going to buy tickets for this next year? And we're actually not going to see, and I know people expected, even last night, the first home game since this news, I think the announced crowd was like 24,000 or something like that.
Yeah, they expected 19,000, 20,000. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people expect it to be empty, and I don't think there were 24,000 people there. But the thing that we always point out is tickets, first of all, when they announce attendance, it's called announced attendance, which is just another way of saying tickets sold versus actual butts in seats. They're not counting butts or they're not releasing data on butts in seats. All they care about is tickets sold. And the vast majority of tickets sold are sold before the season.
Yeah, 85% is what I've heard from. Yeah, right.
And so the even possibility, no matter how frustrated and upset and boycott driven Twins fans might be, you can't take back those tickets sold. They're sold. And so as you look at the attendance figures over the next, whatever, 20-something home games that are left, keep that in mind when you think, how are there 25,000 people here? Well, they're not. There are 25,000 tickets sold, and that took place months and months and months ago. I will read you to your point that they are the only ones thrilled about this. Them, the Pohlads. A couple other Joe Pohlad quote. The one that got everyone was, "We feel we're the right people to lead this organization," which is what he told Dan Hayes. Yes. Which is, my God. I mean, that's I
bet they do feel that way.
I have no doubt that he could pass a lie detector test. That he believes that. But I mean, my God,
what evidence is there?
I don't. It's tone deaf rather as opposed to BS.
Right.
But and then the other one was Joe Pohlad said, and he said this, I believe, to Phil Miller of the Star Tribune, quote, "I don't think we could have imagined a better outcome."
Right.
And if we can,
I bet he's right.
Flip this around and just view it from their point of view, the Pohlad family's point of view, with no consideration given to the fan base, because they don't give consideration to that. Very little consideration given to like the on-field product or the competitiveness and all that. Just from the Pohlad family standpoint, think about what they did. They managed to bring in hundreds of millions of dollars in, capital infusion, cash, probably directly to pay off this entire debt, I suspect. And they didn't have to give up controlling interest in the team, which actually made me think of the reports from maybe 3 months ago, Danny and others, and they actually got ripped by fans because it seemed so ridiculous at the time. And I think this is actually proven pretty correct, which is there were reports that, hey, actually Joe Pohlad would, even if they sell controlling interest, he would kind of like to remain the head of this snake here. He would like to remain in the executive chair, face of the franchise ownership role, even if technically the Pohlads don't have a majority share anymore. And at the time, people were like, well, who would ever buy, 60% or 100% of a team that is for sale because this ownership group has done such a horrible job over decades with it, and then go, actually, I'll leave the third generation Nepo baby in charge of this thing.
Yeah, right.
Well, I do think that was implausible, completely implausible, if they were to have sold the entire thing. But they have found sort of a loophole in that. They have sold a big chunk of it, brought in hundreds of millions of dollars, and guess who's going to be at the top of the chain still? Joe Pohlad is still going to be running it.
And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more. For another, just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Gleeman.